Hello, this is MrChabry, and let's talk about the flying types that you're going to have access to as you play through Pokemon X and Y. Flying type is a great typing. It does very well against a lot of things, and you kind of need it to fly around the map eventually once you get the HM for fly. So let's talk about which Pokemon fit the flying type the best. And starting off, we're going to look at probably one of the first flying types that you would have access to, and that's going to be Talonflame. Now, Talonflame, as you see, has really good speed, 126, and that's really its best stat. 81 attack is not the best. It can do some work in the early game, where you're more likely to end up with this thing, but really, that speed stat is the best thing. Now, it is a fire flying type, and that gives you some interesting resist and ground type immunity. And in terms of moves, you want to do something like, I know this suggests acrobatics, but Brave Bird is probably going to be what you end up with. Flare Blitz for a fire type stab. Roost to heal up. And you can even throw Will-O-Wisp on here. However, most of the time when you find these things, it's going to have Flame Body. So you might have a chance to burn anyway. But yeah, this is actually a good Pokemon. It does get Swords Dance, so that can help you with that attack stat. And if you do get one with Gale Wings, that will boost the priority of all your flying types. In fact, this thing was seen as one of the biggest threats in Generation 6 battling because of this ability, Gale Wings. Now, later they nerfed Gale Wings to where you have to have like a certain amount of HP for it to activate. And if you fall below that, well, then the ability goes away. But here in Generation 6, flying type moves are most of the time going first. So yeah, this is actually a really cool Pokemon. It's really good, especially for the early game. It does get outclassed by other flying types, but you can see it's really fast, blazingly fast. Let's go ahead and look at the next one that you'll find. So Pidgeot is also one that you'd find early on in the game. In fact, this might actually be the first one you come across, because the first wild encounter you always come across is going to be a Pidgey. So there's a good chance that you will easily catch this thing. Now, when you're looking at it and comparing it to Talonflame, you can see that this thing has kind of not as good. Now, it does have a slightly more bulk. That's really it. It's slower. It doesn't hit as hard. Really, their attack stat and special attack stat are so close that there's not that much of a difference. So think of it as a slower Talonflame that doesn't have fire typing. Now, this will be decent early game as well. However, I do think it is one of the flying types that will be outclassed. Now, the good thing about Pidgeot rather, is it does have a Mega Form. You see this Mega Form, it is fast, and it hits so hard. 135 special attack, 121 speed. This thing is a truck in the air. And Hurricane is the best move for it, because with no guard, you don't have to worry about missing Hurricanes. So I would say this is a Pokemon that can help you out in the early game. Later on, when you get access to the Mega Forms, Mega Pidgeot is actually a great Mega as well. But yeah, if you're doing just in-game team, there's some other flying types that might be a little bit more up your alley. Vivillon. Now, this is the early game encounter. Just like how every Pokemon game, there's usually a bug type that you come across early on that isn't the strongest, and that would be Vivillon for these games. It is a bug flying type, and it has okay speed and special attack for the early game. This is outclassed so badly. I wouldn't suggest putting this on your team unless you're wanting a challenge run or to play on hard mode. But yeah, it's pretty frail. It can do some stuff with that special attack. It is okay speed-wise in the early game. I gotta keep saying the early game, because this thing will be outsped almost by everything by the point you get to the mid-game. So yeah, I would say Vivillon. I know it's cute, I know it's adorable, but it is so easily outclassed. I would say it's probably not the best. Now, if you do run something like this, Quiver Dance is a move that you probably actually need on this Pokemon, because otherwise you're not going to be able to take that many hits. Quiver Dance will increase special attack, special defense, and speed. And you can see special attack and speed really helps out. And special defense, eventually that would give you some more survivability on Vivillon. So that's actually pretty cool. I do like its movesets. You can give it Energy Powder, Hurricane, Sleep Powder to get free setup. If we scroll down, Quiver Dance, like I said, you need Quiver Dance. So it might not be the best. Bug Buzz for Bug Stab. You can throw Electro Web on it, get some electric coverage, and also lower the opponent's speed. Giga Drain, a lot of these bug types do get Giga Drain, which is a pretty good move. Powder, I think Powder is its signature move. And with Powder, you can actually prevent the opponent from going for Fire-type moves onto you, because it's kind of like putting a combustible powder on a Pokemon, and as soon as they try to, you know, flare up a Fire-type move, it blows back in their face. Psychic is also pretty good. So yeah, move-wise, this thing has some really good moves. It's just, you have to have Quiver Dance to make it work. And if you're doing an in-game team, wasting turns of Quiver Dance just slows you down. So I would say this is a challenge run Pokemon. Butterfree, a lot of the same things that I said about Vivillon also applies to Butterfree. It is slower, but it's slower. That's really all I can say about it. I mean, its HP is lower. It does have higher special defense, but its HP slower doesn't really give you much in terms of that. So think of it as a slower Vivillon that really, you know, it's an iconic Pokemon. I will give it that. But it's one of those that has to have Quiver Dance to be able to do anything. And if you're having to go for Quiver Dance just to be able to do any form of damage or have any form of survivability, it's better off just to have something that can be thrown out and immediately go to work. Mothim, a lot of the same things I've said before apply to Mothim. This one's a little bit different because it's more offensive focused than even Vivillon and Butterfree, but not really by much, because 94 attack, 94 special attack, that's not really going to help you out that much. And you can see here, it's a Pokemon that also needs Quiver Dance. There's also a Choice Specs suggested set, but I mean, yeah, that's slow, so it's going to be hit really hard by something. So I would say this is another challenge run Pokemon. Say Sinnoh was your favorite region, and you want to use Sinnoh bug types. Well, that's the only way I could see this applying, because it's really outclassed by so many things. And then Masquerain. I think it's funny that all the butterfly Pokemon are just in a row. They all fall in a row. Now, this one has Intimidate, so it does have something in terms of helping it survive. But other than that, it is another Pokemon that has to have Quiver Dance to even be able to do anything. So another challenger in Pokemon. Say you want to do a butterfly only or moth only run. Well, that's the only way I would suggest these Pokemon. I do have to say, I did use Masquerain in some competitive battling. Mainly because of the utility it gave. It didn't really outright do a lot. If you go back to, I forgot what the challenge was called, but it was one of those challenges where you had a very specific list of Pokemon, and I threw Masquerain on there with Focus Sash, mainly to set up sticky webs first, go for a Quiver Dance, and usually people would see this and they know it's not going to do much, but after a Quiver Dance I would just start spamming Blizzard. It didn't really get that many knockouts, but it was more of a tech Pokemon, if anything. So, you know, on an in-game team, if you have to use Quiver Dance to even do anything, it's probably best just not to use it. Now, here we go. This is a good flying type. When I say good flying type, I don't mean that it's good as a flying type. I mean that it's a good Pokemon that happens to be flying type. The problem with Gyarados is it has this flying typing attached to it, and really all that does is it just changes some of the resistances and weaknesses. Because other than that, you don't really have any good flying type moves that you can take advantage of this monster. Let's kind of look at its stats. 81 speed, it's not the fastest thing, but it does have some good bulk. It has 95 HP with a 100 special defense, so it can take some special hits pretty well. And Intimidate is going to help it with that physical side as well. 125 attack is beautiful. It is a beautiful attack stat on this monster. Plus, you also have access to Dragon Dance. So if you go for a Dragon Dance, you improve that speed, and you also crank that attack up into sky-high level. So this is a great Pokemon if you want a flying type. Really, I think Bounce is its only flying type move that it gets, and it's a pretty bad flying type move. This one also has a Mega, but the Mega loses the flying type, and it gains Dark type. So if you do want to use Gyarados and you want to use that Mega form, keep that in mind. But yeah, otherwise, you know, it's a great Pokemon that is flying type, but as a flying type, it's not the best flying type. It doesn't do much with that flying typing, except being super, super weak to electric. And that's the one thing with this thing. Do not send it out on an electric Pokemon. I don't care if it's got 100 special defense. This thing's going to get sneezed at by a Pachirisu, and then it's going to probably faint. So, yeah, Gyarados is otherwise a great choice. Farfetch'd, this is a gimmick Pokemon, if I've ever seen a gimmick Pokemon. I'll just want to point out, we were looking at some of the early flying types, like, you know, the bug types that you get access to early on. This thing is outclassed by the early bug type Pokemon. Just take that into account. Just think about that. This thing is outclassed by the early route bugs. Yeah, Farfetch'd is not doing much on your team. Look at that attack stat. 65, it's garbage. 60 speed, it's slow. It's frail as all get out. Even Pidgeot is a better normal flying type, so if you really want that typing, you've got other things. The only thing I would think that is cool about this is it gets Swords Dance, but Talonflame gets Swords Dance. So it doesn't even have that anymore. So this is a garbage Pokemon. Challenge Run only, and that's only if you want it on super difficult mode, because this thing is not doing very much for your team. Ladian is a Pokemon. I feel like, I'm actually sad to say, this thing does not have much that it can actually do on a team. Ever since Game Freak introduced this thing to the world of Pokemon, it's just been kind of a joke. Look at that, 110 special defense. That's its best stat right there. It can take special hits okay, but it doesn't have the HP to back up that stat. Its attack is dismal. And its hit ability is Iron Fist, so you want it to have good attack, but its attack is garbage. Special attack is also garbage. Okay speed for the early game. This is a challenge run Pokemon, and it's going to be hard. You can see the sets that it suggests is just support. Not even U-turn just to get it out of the way, so you can bring it back in to set up light screen again. That's really all that it's got, and it's just not a good Pokemon. So challenge run only, and it's not even good at challenge runs because it's going to struggle against everything. Vespiquen, this is a bulky bug flying type. A lot of the bug flying types we've seen so far have quirks about them. This Pokemon's quirk is that it tries to be a bulky bug flying type. Now, typing wise, being a bug and flying type that's trying to be bulky, it does not work out very well. You're weak to so many things that you're going to come across. And even its bulk is not the best. 70 HP with 102 defense and special defense. It's not going to survive that many hits. And it's pretty slow, too. It has terrible attack and special attack. As you can see here, the suggested sets are trying to set things up with Tailwind and then just hit things to weaken it down the opponent. And it also suggests Destiny Bond. So if your Pokemon that you want to use in-game, the suggested set is put Destiny Bond on it, so that way when it inevitably gets knocked out, you at least take something down with it. You know that it's not a good Pokemon. So challenge run only, not a good Pokemon. Now Charizard, this is a good flying type. This is one of the starters that you will have access to once you get to Lumio City. And I would say this is also a good fire type if you're wanting a good fire type as well. Looking at that speed stat, 100, it can outspeed a few things, but that 109 special attack stat is really good. The good thing about this is also you have access to 2 Mega forms based on what game you've got. So if you got Mega Charizard Y from buying, you know, the Y version, you get an insane special attack stat at 159. Look at that. That thing hits like a truck flying out of a rocket ship. That thing hits so hard. Plus you have the Drought ability, so your Fire Blast is going to OHKO almost everything that tries to face this pseudo dragon. Attack stat does go up a little bit, and its bulkiness on special defense side goes up. But really, Charizard's not meant to be a bulky Pokemon. So I think that's a really cool stat distribution. If you have Pokemon X, it replaces flying with dragon, but I still think it's a great type combination, even though you lose some of the resist that you've got. Like, you know, you resist fighting, you resist well, strongly resist bug. Now you just resist bug. And you also gain a ground type weakness. But I think if you've got Pokemon X and you're looking at Charizard, I think that's an okay trade-off, because look at these stats. This is a more physical attack-oriented Pokemon because it has Tough Claws and it's got 130 attack. So, and you can still run the special moves pretty easily on Mega X. So Charizard's a great flying type Pokemon. Once you get those Mega Stones, or you get access to the Mega Band, you will have a great Pokemon that will do so much work for your whole team. Dodrio is an interesting flying type. It is a normal flying type that is okay. It's kind of decent. You're not wanting to take hits on this thing because it will probably get knocked out by anything that tries to look its direction in an angry tone. But other than that, you know, you've got decent attack at 110, decent speed at 100, and you do have things like Brave Bird, Return, Knockoff for coverage. This thing also gets Drill Run, so that's also no, it doesn't get Drill Run. Sorry, Drill Peck. That's if you don't want to rely on Brave Bird, Drill Peck is probably a good move there. But yeah, this thing, it does get some decent things, and you know that speed stat's pretty okay. It does get outclassed pretty hard later on, but I mean, if you really want to run this thing, you could make it work. Now Ninjask, I think this is an interesting Pokemon. Bug flying. We've seen so many bug flying types, but this is one of the few bug flying types that has a niche that it can actually fill. Has 160 speed. That is a great speed stat. This thing, look at those wings. You know it's fast when its wings are so fast that they're barely even animated. This thing is so fast. And 90 attack, it's not really the best, but you can throw Swords Dance on that beast. And Swords Dance is going to raise your attack up by 2. So 90 attack, throw that on there. It's great. I would also suggest throwing Protect on there. Now, why Protect? Well, you get the speed boost. I know it has a crazy speed stat, but say you end up paralyzed with this thing. Protect, get a speed boost. That paralysis, you're likely to still outspeed whatever paralyzed you. So, very fast Pokemon. You also get Infiltrator. I think that's a hidden ability, though. And that's going to make it where you can still hit pretty decent behind Reflect, Light Screen. And you can actually hit things that have set up a substitute. A lot of times people run this with Baton Pass, which, you know, if you want to go that way, for an in-game team, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Throwing Baton Pass on something. But say you've got something that you really want to use. Say, you know, you didn't listen to me when I said that thing about Farfetch. You want to make Farfetch work. Well, you can just throw Swords Dance on this thing, Protect, get a speed boost, get an attack boost, and then Baton Pass, throw Farfetch out there. Now you've turned a garbage Farfetch into a threat. So that's the cool thing about Ninjask. It can do stuff like that easily. It can hit hard. Just know that it is so frail. It's going to take a lot of damage from anything. So you could probably make it work. Just keep its weaknesses in mind. Swanna. Now this is a Pokemon that is decent once you get it. It does get outclassed pretty hard. And I do think this thing works better in Generation 5 where there's less competition for water flying types. But yeah, this thing has 98 speed, so that is a decent speed stat. And attack and special attack are okay. It's not going to do a lot of damage, but You've got that. Now, keep in mind, it's pretty frail, though. So, it's going to get hit pretty hard by certain things. Now, its abilities are not the best. Not at all. So, I mean, this is more of a challenge run Pokemon. You could make it work as a challenge run Pokemon, but as an in-game team, I would say it gets outclassed pretty hard by some other flying types. Move-wise, you can throw Scald on it, and that would be a great move. Roost for survivability. Hurricane for flying stab. And really, you know, if you want to run a physical set, you can. Most people suggest the special set just because it has better special moves than physical moves. But you could still make a physical Swanna work. It's just a challenge. Next up is Jump Pluff. Now, this is a Pokemon that is grass flying. And it has a good speed stat, 110. But that's really the only thing that this thing has going for it. In fact, it is meant to be a setup Pokemon. You can see here the suggestion is Swords Dance. And then Sleep Powder, so you can put things to sleep. Encore to trap things in. And you can see 55 attack. You have to throw Swords Dance on this. Because if you don't, this thing is just going to get destroyed by anything that's out there. So, like I said, as an in-game team, you don't want to necessarily rely on things that need Swords Dance. This is probably one that, you know, is probably better to skip. 95 special defense is okay, but, you know, 75 HP is not helping it out much. 110 speed is the best thing, and, you know, Chlorophyll, you get the sun up, it's super fast. So maybe you want to do, like, a fast sleep powder. You could do... That's really the only niche that this thing could really fill. It is a challenge to use on an in-game team. Crobat. Now, this is actually a really good Pokemon. I do like Crobat. 130 speed, it is pretty fast. Inner Focus, you don't have to worry about being flinched by, say, Fake Out or anything. If you do get the hidden ability, Infiltrator is also good. But yeah, 90 attack's not the best, but I think the thing that it has going for it is it does have a little bit of survivability. It has that speed stat. And Poison Flying is an interesting type combination. Now, a lot of times, I don't really touch Poison types because they're not the best. But... you know, I do like Crobat. I do appreciate a good Crobat set. So move-wise, you know, it suggests Brave Bird. That's if you want a lot of damage. Cross Poison's a good Poison-type move. It has a high crit chance. U-turn, you can send it out if you don't like the matchup. U-turn out, and it's fast enough that it can probably get out of there. If you find that you're facing a lot of trainers that are trying to set up their evasion, Aerial Ace will help you on that. Acrobatics will do good if you don't have an item. You can also run something like Confuse Ray on this Pokemon and, you know, make it more annoying for your opponent. You know, Koga did that to us back in Gen 2. Now you can do that to others. Hypnosis, put things to sleep. Just keep in mind it's very inaccurate. It says 60% accuracy. In Pokemon, that usually means barely going to hit it. Poison Fang is decent at a point. But yeah, this is a great Pokemon. Roost, I love Roost on this thing. But yeah, the thing about Crobat is it can actually do some decent work on your team. I do know a lot of people competitively used it for special attack, even though it's only 70. Because it actually does get some decent special moves, surprisingly. You can throw Sludge Bomb on it, Giga Drain, Heat Wave. So yeah, a really pretty decent Pokemon all around. If you want to run this thing, I could say that this thing could probably work on your team. Just keep in mind some of its limitations. It's not going to outright knock out everything you throw it out against, but you're pretty fast. You can hit things decently hard. This is a decent flying type choice. Now, Drifblim, the problem with Drifblim is it wants to be a bulky Pokemon, but it struggles in that it doesn't have that much defense and special defense. See, this thing is supposed to be like a balloon. So a balloon, you know, you think of a balloon, it's big. It's easy to puncture a balloon. That's the problem with Drifblim. It's not very fast at 80 speed. So a lot of things are going to hit you. I mean, its HP stat is good, but it doesn't have the defense and special defense to necessarily 100% help it out. It can survive things that would normally be surprising. but really it's just not the best if you want a bulky flying type. Ghost Flying, however, that is a cool type combination. You don't see that many Ghost Flying type Pokemon. However, it does give it a lot of interesting weaknesses like Dark, Electric, Ghost, Ice, and Rock. You do have 3 immunities. That's actually really good if you want to, run something that you can switch into a lot of things that run, maybe like normal moves, fighting moves, or ground moves. You can throw this thing out there and not worry necessarily about getting hit by those things. So this is actually a decent Pokemon if you want it in that regard. However, otherwise, like offensively, 90 special attack is not really the best. And you can see even down here the sets suggest like physical attacks. Here's a special attacking set. Thunderbolt, it does get Thunderbolt, which is good. Shadow Ball, of course. Air Cutter. It's kind of like one of the few flying type special moves that you can get access to. And I think that's kind of the problem with this. It does have some interesting moves that you can throw on it. But they're mostly like support moves like Icy Wind, Knock Off. You don't really necessarily get something that's like super powerful. Shadow Ball is probably going to be your best bet. Shadow Ball really is the best move for this thing. But otherwise, it's not going to live that many hits eventually. It will get worn down pretty quickly. And it's not going to do great amounts of damage. Now, Salamence. This is a good flying type. It's Dragon Flying. So that gives you a lot of resist. A lot of good things. Now, keep in mind, you are weak to the new Fairy type in this game. And you're quad weak to Ice. But yeah, you get the Intimidate, so that's going to help its survivability on that defense side. And it does have some decent bulk, 95. It's going to be able to, take advantage of that Intimidate and take hits. And it does have a really good attack stat at 135. So you'll be able to hit things decently hard. You've got a decent speed stat. I do think the Mega was introduced in Oris, so if you're playing through X and Y, you don't have access to this thing. But let's just kind of talk about its stats. Yeah, it gets even bulkier, even harder hitting, faster. Mega Salamence is one of those Pokemon that kind of just broke the metagame when it was introduced, and they had to ban it to Ubers because it's so powerful. But unless you're in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, you're not going to see this thing at all. You're just going to see this fella here. And he can still do stuff like Dragon Dance. Now, look at that. 100 speed. Boost that up. Now it's a lot faster. It can hit a lot harder. If you get the hidden ability Moxie, well, each time you knock something out, you're boosting that attack stat even more. And I would say this is a Mega set. Probably not going to help you out if you're doing it in-game. But I would say Dragon Dance, of course, would be great. Earthquake for coverage. Maybe something like Dragon Claw. In terms of flying type moves, it doesn't really get the best, and that's why the Mega has the Aerialate ability, where it turns normal type moves into flying type moves. But Roost is good, and you can throw Roost on that, help its survivability. That's kind of the downside of this. It doesn't have that many great flying type moves. You could probably throw, Aerial Ace early on, get Fly, and use it as your flyer. But yeah, this is actually a really good Pokemon. Good stats, good ability, good typing, good moveset, all around good flying type. Now, Pelipper is a Pokemon that in Generation 6 really struggles to find its footing. Later on, they did give it the Drizzle ability. Here, it doesn't have that. Here, its only use is a defensive Pokemon. And it doesn't really do that even well, because 100 defense with 60 HP. It's kind of a garbage Pokemon. Even with good resistances, it can't really make advantage of that, and it can't do much damage back. Now, you can see here, physically defensive is the suggested set, but, it's not going to do much. It's more of a challenger in Pokemon. It's one that I would personally say it's probably best to skip Pelipper. Now, Swellow is a decent flying-type Pokemon. 125 speed is pretty fast. 85 attack. Now, on paper, that looks like it's not going to do much, but if you have the Guts ability, if you put, like, say, a Flame Orb on this thing, it's going to be able to take a lot of damage out on your opponent. And you do have, like, good special attacks, but I wouldn't suggest that on your in-game team because look at that, 50 special attack. There's things that's better at that. So I would suggest a Guts physical attacker. Facade has to be there. U-turn for, like, if you don't like your matchup. quick attack if, say, you come across like one of the few things that could outspeed Swallow. And other than that, you know, flying type, Brave Bird really does hurt this thing. But it does a lot of damage if you have Guts and Brave Bird. But I would say Facade, because you get Stab on Facade as well. And with Guts, this is a one that it is a challenge, but you could actually get it to work on your in-game team, and it could actually do some work. Swoobat is a Pokemon that I think is on the just go ahead and skip it list. It has good speed. That's all I can say for it. Special attack is its next best stat, and it's at 77. That's not really that good. Now, it does get some good moves. Psychic, Air Slash, Shadow Ball. It does get support options, too. Calm Mind is good. Signal Beam. Stored Power, if you have something like Calm Mind, would help out, too. But, I mean, really, it's just not that good of a Pokemon. I would say skip Swoobat. It's a hard Pokemon to make work. Aerodactyl. Now, this is another good flying type. Look at that speed. 130 speed. It is on par with Crobat. Crobat and Aerodactyl are going pretty much the same speed. But this thing has even better attack stat. Look at that. 105. That's a good attack stat right there. It has Rock Flying. Now, that does mean that it has a lot of common weaknesses. But it also has some good resist. So, that's a good one. I would say also, in terms of moves, it does get some good moves like Earthquake, Roost for survivability, Stone Edge. You can throw Pursuit on this thing as well, but you're not worried about things switching out that much. Aqua Tail gives you good water coverage. The only thing that I think kind of holds this thing back at this point is it doesn't have that great of flying type moves. This is a Pokemon that once you get the flying HM, you need to throw it on this thing, because otherwise it's working with Wing Attack, and that's not really that great of a move. Roost, Hone Claws, Fire Blast. It does surprisingly get some decent special moves, but I wouldn't suggest that because 60 special attack is kind of garbage. Now, this is one of those Pokemon that you do have access to its Mega Form. And looking at that Mega Form, look at that. 150 speed. It is fast. 135 attack. It hits hard. And it's got the Tough Claws ability. So any moves where you make contact is going to be boosted. Now this thing is a beast, and it's going to be able to do a lot of damage. So I would say Aerodactyl, say you want to try out a rock type and you need a flying type to get through the game, this right here would be a great choice for your team. Emolga is pretty much a gimmick Pokemon. 103 speed is okay, but that all has. This is one that, like, if you want the challenge, you can try to run it, but it doesn't get any better. And in the late game, it's just going to hold you back. It's going to be a spot on your team that, at that point, you're going to be wishing you had something else. So I would say skip Emolga. Yanmega is an interesting Pokemon. It has decent speed at 95 and good special attack at 116. And if you have speed boost on this thing, well, that 95 speed, even though it's not the best, you can eventually get that thing steamrolling where it's faster. So this is actually a pretty cool Pokemon. I do appreciate a good Yanmega. Bug Flying, this is probably, in my opinion, one of the better Bug Flying types. Usually Bug Flying Pokemon are just not that good. This one actually could do some work for you. Bug Buzz for stab, Air Slash for stab, and then you can throw Giga Drain on it, which can actually give you some survivability. And Shadow Ball, it learns Shadow Ball. So yeah, it does get some pretty decent moves. And it can boost up with those. Silver Wind actually will boost up your stats. You have a 10% chance of that happening. And that would actually help you out in your survivability. Because I think, honestly, out of all the things to look at with this thing, it does struggle with its survivability. Because the 86 HP is decent. But it's 56 special defense. It's going to get hit pretty hard by things like Thunderbolt or Flamethrower, or even an opponent's Air Slash is going to do a lot of damage. So keep that in mind. Protect it from special hits. But if you're really wanting a Bug Flying type, this is probably the better choice out of all the ones that we've seen so far. Hawlucha is a great flying type. This is a fighting flying type. which, of course, it gives it a lot of weaknesses, but that gives you a lot of things you can hit pretty hard. 118 speed, you are pretty fast. And you've got 92 attack, which, you know, is decent, but you can throw Swords Dance on that thing and do some really good work. Plus, you've got Limber, so you don't have to worry about being paralyzed. You can throw Unburden on this thing, and with Acrobatics, actually do a lot of damage. So, this is a Pokemon that can actually do a lot of work. I would also suggest something like High Jump Kick, because it hits really hard. Keep in mind, you have a chance to miss and doing damage back to yourself. But yeah, this is a cool Pokemon. Now, there is a move that I would also say is a really cool move, and it's the only move of its kind, and that is Flying Press. Flying Press is a fighting flying move. It is the only dual type move. I know here it says fighting, but if you look at the effects, combines flying and its type effectiveness. That is an interesting move. It is the only one that combines two types into one move. Flying Press. You can hit things super hard that would normally try to switch in on, say, a flying type or a fighting type. So this thing is a great Pokemon here. It hits things so hard, and it's got a decent move pool. I would say Hawlucha, if you're finding that you want a flying and fighting type, this would be a solid pick. Psychic Flying of Sigilyph. It's an okay Pokemon. Not the fastest. Doesn't hit as hard. It is a challenge to make it run because it's not the bulkiest Pokemon either. And you can see its abilities really want to run kind of that more defensive idea of this thing, like Magic Guard, Wonder Skin. I think Tinted Lens is a hidden ability, and that actually is a good ability for this thing because it does get a lot of different moves, like Psychic, Heat Wave, Energy Ball, Dazzling Gleam that gives you something against Dark types, Roost for survivability. But yeah, you do have some decent moves with this thing. It's just kind of a struggle to get it to work because, I mean, it gets outclassed by a few things. So yeah, think of this as a challenge run Pokemon. Now, out of the normal flying type, I do think Staraptor is probably the best one because it's got 100 speed, so it is pretty fast, and a 120 attack, which hits like a truck. This thing is so fast and it hits hard. You might look at its bulk and say, oh, it's just not going to survive very much, but with Intimidate, you can actually help it out in its physical defense and how it can survive physical attacks. So that's actually pretty cool. It gets good moves like Brave Bird. You can give it Close Combat, which gives you good coverage. Double Edge, a lot of people run that from normal. I mean, it's got downside, the same downside as Brave Bird. That's kind of the problem with this thing. But you can also throw something like Heat Wave, which I wouldn't really suggest that necessarily because 50 special attack. But you do have access to stuff like that. But yeah, this is actually a really good Pokemon. It hits things pretty hard. And when you're doing an in-game team, you know, if you are stocked up on potions, some of that recoil damage is not going to hold you back that much. Just hit things with a Brave Bird and just move on to the next trainer. Chatot, this is a gimmick Pokemon where the gimmick is lost to Generation 4. The only gimmick with this is you can make it change its cry. That's it. It's got 91 speed, which is okay. 92 special attack. But yeah, it's just not that great of a Pokemon. It's super frail. Super frail. If anything, on a super effective side, like Electric, Ice, and Rock, happens to stare at this thing too long, it'll just faint because of that. Because it's so frail. Run things like Boom Burst for stab, Heat Wave for coverage, U-turn to get it out of there. And really, that's probably the best thing to do is just get it out of there. This is a Pokemon, I would say just go ahead and skip this one. Mantine, now this is a Pokemon that is pretty cool on paper. Has 140 special defense, which is a really good special defense stat. It can hit things, it can take a lot of special hits. Now keep in mind, it is quad weak to electric, so you don't want to do that necessarily. But it has only one other weakness, and that's rock. So this thing can be a very good survival Pokemon if you need to. But the problem with it is it doesn't actually do that much offensively. 80 special attack is not that good. It is pretty slow. Well, that's why the suggested set is throw Substitute and Toxic. Just try to stall out your opponent. Scald is also a decent move on this thing. Defog, you see it suggests more utility sets. But here's an all-out offensive set, and you can throw something like Signal Beam for coverage, Hydro Pump, Air Slash, Scald. Let's see what other things that it gets. It does get some interesting physical moves like Bulldoze, but this thing is not going to be doing... It gets Earthquake. Actually, that's interesting, but you don't want to rely on that physical stat. It gets good physical moves, surprisingly, but you're not going to be using it for that because it's not going to do anything. So really, if you want to run this, keep in mind this is going to be a challenge run Pokemon, and you do have some good special defense from this thing, but the battles are going to run pretty long because it's going to take you a while to even knock out your opponents. Articuno. Now, this is where we're getting into some of the legendary flying types. And what you're going to see is that these 3 legendary flying types are actually really good as an in-game team Pokemon. Articuno being the first one, probably the one that you will struggle the most if you throw this on your team. It does have a lot of good things going for it. I mean, look at that special defense stat. 125, it can take some hits. Defense 100, that's decent. HP 90, that's also decent. 95 special attack is where you're going to do your most damage. And it's not going to be doing that much damage, unfortunately. So keep that in mind that it's going to kind of struggle on the offensive side, but you can take hits pretty well. That is, if you're not getting hit with a rock type. Now, rock type just annihilates this boy. But other than that, it can actually do some work, and it does get some cool moves. You can see here, this is a more utility set. But I would say throw Freeze Dry on it, because it's an ice type move that's super effective on water. And that's actually a cool type interaction. Ice Beam, Hurricane for flying stab. Roost would also be good on this thing. I want to see what it suggests for the higher tiers. Yeah, Roost would also be good. It does get Hill Bell, which is actually interesting. You can use that. Say you're facing like a tough opponent and you've used up all of your full restores. Well, then throw Hill Bell on this thing, and you might be able to come back from that. So yeah, this is actually a good Pokemon. Say you want an Ice type as well. You could actually make Articuno work. Zapdos, this is another good flying type. Electric Flying is a good typing. Look at all those resistances. It resists so many things. And it does have enough bulk to make use of that. Look at that, 90 HP with 85 defense, 90 special defense. This thing is pretty decently fast with 100, but it hits so hard with 125 special attack. And in terms of moves, it does get some good options. It gets Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, and Heat Wave for coverage. Now, I would also suggest Roost. You never know when you'll need Roost. But yeah, Thunderbolt and Heat Wave is going to be your main go-to with this boy, because he's going to do a lot of damage. And the things that are immune to Thunderbolt, Heat Wave them instead. Or even U-turn out, Volt Switch out. Just switch it out if you need to. But this thing is actually a decent Pokemon. The last of the flying type legendaries is Moltres. And Moltres is the slower of them with 90 speed. But it does still have that good special attack stat at 125. Yeah, so that's actually a good special attack stat. It does get 100 attack. But when you look at its movesets, it's better off running those special sets. Fire Blast, Hurricane. Always do good. Roost for survivability. And look at those resistances. Good resistances all across the board. So I think Moltres is another good Mon. Next up is Honchkrow. This is actually one that I loved using a lot back in competitive on 3DS days. This thing is a dark flying type, which is a cool type combination. And it has good attack with 125. Its special attack's also pretty decent, 105. It is on the slower side, however, and it's pretty frail. 100 HP is good, but it's not helping you out much with those defenses. So I would suggest if you run this thing, Sucker Punch is a requirement. Because you're so slow, you're going to be hit by so many things. Brave Bird for flying stab. Roost for survivability. Superpower probably for coverage. You can also throw Heat Wave on it, and with that special attack stat, you can actually do some decent work with a Heat Wave. So this is also a good Pokemon. Just keep in mind it's slow, but with Sucker Punch and, you know, predicting your opponent, this is actually a great Dark Flying type. Delibird, this is a gimmick Pokemon. It is frail, it's slow, doesn't do much. Think of what I said with Farfetch, but now I'm talking about an Ice Flying type, which it's just not that good. And its movesets are not the best. You can see here the suggested set with this Delibird is Destiny Bond. Send it out, try to set up what you can, and then just let it die. That if the suggested moveset is just let that Pokemon die, you know you don't have a good Pokemon. So Delibird, I would say skip this Pokemon. Fearow, it's okay. It's surprisingly so late in the game that at this point you've come across so many flying types that outclass it. I don't know why they put it so late in the game. But you can see 100 speed's okay, 90 attack's okay, but that's really all it is. It's pretty frail. You've already came across other normal flying types that are actually better than this thing. It does get some good moves. Drill Run, Drill Peck, Double Edge, or Return. U-turn to get it out of there. So yeah, it does get some decent moves. However, it's so late in the game, and I would say if you're wanting a challenge run, you can make it work. Skarmory. Now, this is a Pokemon that I really do like. On an in-game team, usually you want to skip out the bulkier-minded Pokemon. But this is one that I still think is a decent Pokemon. Look at that defense. 140 defense. Look at that type interaction. It resists so many things. Steel type is one of the best types in terms of defensiveness. And Skarmory's got that going for it. It doesn't do that much offensively with only 80 attack, and it is pretty slow. So all the suggested sets is just make sure you throw Roost on it and whatever you need to set up for it to set up. But yeah, this is a Pokemon that I think you could make work on your team. Just keep in mind, it's not doing a lot of damage back to the opponent. Noivern is a cool Pokemon. I do like this thing. It has 123 speed, so it's pretty fast. 97 special attack means it can hit things pretty hard. And usually at this point, you know, you think fast, hits hard, it might be a glass cannon. It can take some surprisingly a good number of hits with 85 HP and then 80 in defenses. It can take hits that you would normally think would just one-shot it. And it does get some good moves. Like, it actually has good moves. Like, look down here. Draco Meteor for stab, Hurricane for stab, but you also can throw Flamethrower, U-turn, Air Slash, Roost for survivability. So, yeah, you actually get some interesting moves. Boom Burst is a good move. It hits things pretty hard. Dark Pulse. Focus Blast. So, you do have some options that you can throw on this thing and just make it a threat. You can throw Shadow Ball on this. So let's go ahead and look. Now, the special attacks, I mean, the physical attacks, you don't really want to rely on it because it's only 70. But yeah, and you can also get Infiltrator. That's a good ability. Frisk is good just for information. But yeah, this is actually a decent flying type Pokemon if you also want a dragon type. Gliscor. Now, this is one of the best bulky flying types in the game, in my opinion. 125 defense means it can take a lot of hits. 95 attack means it's not a slouch. It's not like Skarmory, who's kind of just sitting there and hoping that maybe if it hits enough times, it knocks something out. No, this thing could actually knock things out. 95 speed means it's decently fast. So yeah, this is bulky. It's got some ways to hit, and it's decently fast. And looking at its moveset, you can throw Swords Dance and Roost on this thing to help its survivability. Earthquake is probably the best move to throw on it. I would also suggest something like Aerial Ace for Flying Stab if you're doing in-game. If you're doing something like competitive, Poison Hill is what you want, even though that is a hidden ability. And that just helps its survivability. So this is a great Pokemon. I think this is a good Pokemon if you're wanting your flying type to double as a ground type. And you look at that resistances. It resists a lot of things. It's only weak to water and ice. So this is a great Pokemon right here. Noctowl, this is a more defensive-minded Pokemon with 96 special defense and 100 speed or HP. But that's all that it's got going for it. It could take a few hits on the special side, but if you're not able to counter and, you know, do a lot of damage back, it's just kind of sitting there. So I would say this is a challenger in Pokemon. For a normal playthrough, however, it's probably best to skip it. Scyther is actually a decent Pokemon if you're wanting a bug flying type. 105 speed is pretty good. 110 attack is good. And you can also throw Swords Dance on this thing. Now, if you do throw Swords Dance, Aerial Ace is a good move. You do have access to Technician, which is probably the best ability for this monster. Roost, Aerial Ace, Swords Dance. It suggests U-turn, but that's competitive. You don't necessarily need U-turn. You can use things like, say, Knock Off. Bug Bite would probably be your best bug-type stab because you have the boost from Technician. So yeah, this is actually a pretty good Pokemon. Just keep in mind, Bug and Flying is weak to so many things. But if you can play around that, you know, Scyther actually can do a lot of work for you. Altaria is an interesting Pokemon. It's Dragon Flying type, which gives it such a lot of resistances. Look at that. That is good. And it is a bulkier-minded Pokemon with 105 special defense, 90 defense. But that's really its best thing. It can run Dragon Dance, which I would say is a good thing for it. So you can help out with that attack stat. The suggested sets all have special attacks. And it does get some decent special moves, too. I would say Dragon Dance set for your in-game team probably is the best, with Dragon Claw, Earthquake, Roost for survivability. If you do want a special set, you do get some good special moves as well, like Dazzling Gleam. You also get Draco Meteor. You get Dragon Pulse. For your flying type stab, it's kind of where it kind of gets held back a little bit. It doesn't have that great of a flying type stab. But other than that, you know, it has some other good moves that it can actually run pretty well. Now, keep in mind, for this Pokemon, it does have a Mega, but it's an Omega Ruby. So you're not using this thing in X and Y. But you can see in Omega Ruby, this thing gets... in Alpha Sapphire, this thing gains the fairy typing, which is cool, and it gets so much bulkier. So, good Pokemon all around. As keep in mind that it is a more defensive mind Pokemon. So, if you keep that in mind and give it Dragon Dance, it can actually do some work for you. Dragonite. Now, this is another great Dragon Flying Pokemon. Has 134 attack, which is great. And it does have decent special attack, too. So, if you want to run a special set, you can do that. It's got good bulk. If you get the multi-scale ability, well, then you have your damage when you're at full health. And that's really, you know, it gets good moves. Dragon Dance, Outrage to like a nuke, Extreme Speed if you've got one that has that egg move. Earthquake for stab. Fly would be good if you need that. Earthquake, Fire Punch. So yeah, this is actually a really good Pokemon. And if you don't want a physical set, you can also throw special moves on it. Like Flamethrower. That's the thing about these Dragon-type moves. You can throw pretty much any move on it. Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt. So yeah, it's good moves all around. Good stats. Good Pokemon. Good typing. That is actually a decent typing right there. Last flying type is going to be the legendary of Pokemon Y. Now, this is a great Pokemon. Keep in mind, you only have access to this if you're playing Pokemon Y. It is so good with its bulk. Look at that. 126 HP with 95 and 98 respectively on defense and special defense. It can take a lot of hits. 99 speed is not really a slow Pokemon either. It can actually outspeed quite a few things. What I want you to see is that 131 in attack and special attack. You can have a physical attacker or a special attacker. And with that Dark Aura ability, dark moves are going to be boosted. So Dark Pulse is going to get a boost. Sucker Punch is even going to get a boost. Really great Pokemon. It does get Oblivion Wing as its stab, and that's a flying type move that actually heals itself. So that's actually a really good move as well. I would suggest Oblivion Wing, Dark Pulse, maybe Sucker Punch. You don't necessarily need Sucker Punch on an in-game team. Heat Wave for coverage. Focus Blast is also good coverage. But yeah, this is a great Great Pokemon. Keep in mind, if you're playing through Y, you have access to this thing, and it can hit things so hard. Dark Flying is an interesting typing combination. Good stats all around. This is a great legendary Pokemon. So that's it. This ends up being the longest one of our breakdown so far, and we might come across others that might end up stretching out, but I feel like this is going to be the longest one because there's so many flying types available. So if you like this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. I will see you in the next Pokemon video.